Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I grew up in a small close-knit town right in the heart of the Midwest. Life there was simple and unassuming, with long summers spent playing in fields of wheat and cold winters huddled around the fireplace, listening to my grandfather's tales of his youth. During my teenage years, I was known as a kid who could fix anything, from broken bikes to old radios. This knack for problem-solving led me to pursue a degree in mechanical engineering. College was a challenging yet exciting journey. After graduating, I landed a job at a renowned engineering firm in the city, and I quickly climbed the corporate ladder. But as the years passed, I longed for a place where life moved a bit slower and neighbors knew each other by name. So when an opportunity arose to transfer to a smaller branch of my company in a quiet suburb, I took it. And that's how I found myself in this charming neighborhood reminiscent of my hometown. I purchased a cozy house at the end of a cul-de-sac with a decent backyard that was next to a small wooded area, perfect for my dog to run around in. The move was a breath of fresh air, and I spent my weekends exploring local hiking trails and getting to know my neighbors who welcomed me with open arms. I even started a small side project, refurbishing old furniture, which rekindled my childhood love for fixing things. But not everything in this neighborhood was as idyllic as it seemed. The neighborhood was under the watchful eye of the HOA, led by Karen, the neighborhood diva. From the moment I moved in, Karen saw me as an outsider, a person who came to disrupt the careful balance she had created. And so I found myself in an unexpected battle, one that would test my patience in ways I never imagined. Early on, Karen had her eyes on me. She'd walk by my house, clipboard in hand, jotting down notes about everything she found displeasing. But here is the surprising part. I wasn't even part of her HOA. My house was just outside its jurisdiction, something I had confirmed before buying the place. But that didn't stop Karen. Fines started appearing in my mailbox, but I ignored them, of course. I wasn't going to be bullied into compliance, especially by someone who had no authority over me. Karen would knock on my door demanding payment. I stood my ground, reminding her each time that I wasn't part of her HOA, but she wouldn't listen. One day I decided to work on my gardening. Gardening was my way of relaxing, and I took pride in my colorful array of flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. As I was planting some tulips, I heard the unmistakable clack of Karen's high heels on the sidewalk. I looked up to see her approaching. "Good morning, Karen. There is nothing good about this morning. That was you violating HOA rules again." I sighed. "Karen, we've been through this. My house isn't under the HOA's jurisdiction. What seems to be the problem this time?" She pointed a manicured finger at my garden. "Those flowers, they are not approved by the HOA. You're bringing down the neighborhood's aesthetic." I couldn't help but laugh. "Karen, these are tulips. Besides, your rules don't apply here. You're making a big mistake by defying the HOA. I can make things very difficult for you." "I'm not defying anyone. I'm simply doing what I'm free to do on my own property." Karen stepped closer. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." "Is that a threat, Karen?" "It's a promise." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off. I watched her go, and I had no idea then how far she would go to make good on that promise. It was this encounter among several other encounters with Karen, the HOA president, that really built up to that one horrific day when everything went to hell. It seems almost unbelievable now, but each incident felt like another brick in a wall of mounting frustration. Karen would come by almost daily to complain about my lawn. "Your grass is an inch too long," she'd say while waving those HOA fines in my face. Then there was a time she had a fit over my mailbox. "It's not the right shade of gray." I remember laughing at that. A mailbox color? Really? The holidays were no different. I put up some lights and decorations to get into the festive spirit, but Karen saw it as a personal affront. She threatened to tear them down herself, claiming they were too extravagant for the neighborhood standards. I can go on, but I will stop here. You just need to know that each of these encounters was like a small flame, slowly heating the pot of our interactions. And eventually, it all boiled over that day she showed up at my front door with a damn gun. After a busy morning of work, I was at home, taking a break with a cup of coffee. And that's when I heard a knock on my door. Expecting a delivery, I opened it, only to find Karen. A very angry version of Karen. "Good morning, Karen," I greeted her. "You've ignored your last fine. I'll ask you this one last time. Will you pay up or not?" "Not really, no." "Then it's time you learn to respect the HOA." "Karen, we've been over this. I'm not part of your HOA." "You think you're above the rules? Above me?" She reached into her purse and, to my horror, pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at my head. My heart pounded in my chest. "Karen, put the gun down. This is insane." "Go get me my money, you smug brick. Now!" At that moment, fate intervened. A police car patrolling the neighborhood turned into my street. The officers inside the car noticed the altercation at my doorstep. In a flash, they were out of the car drawing their weapons. "Police, drop the weapon." Karen, caught off guard, turned towards the sound, her gun still in hand, and now it's pointed at them. "Ma'am, I will ask again. Drop the weapon," the officer commanded. Karen, realizing the gravity of the situation, slowly lowered her gun. The officers quickly moved in, handcuffing her and reading her rights. I stood there shaking as they took her statement and then mine. I've had issues with her before, but I never imagined she'd go this far, I explained to the officers. As they licked Karen away, my neighbors began to gather, watching the horrific scene with concern. They knew Karen's reputation, but no one had anticipated her taking such drastic measures. The trial of Karen culminated in a more severe sentence than I had anticipated. After the judge heard all the evidence, including her illegal possession of a firearm and the gravity of her threats against me, the verdict was delivered. Karen was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a fine of $5,000. And in the wake of Karen's sentencing, the HOA convened to elect a new president and board. The new elected president made it clear that the HOA's role was to serve the community, not to police it. And I can say that he delivered. He approached me one evening and extended an invitation to join the HOA, but he was quick to add, "There is absolutely no pressure. We'd just love to have you with us. Our goal is to work together, not impose rules." I told him that I appreciate the offer, but that I'm afraid I'll decline. And he didn't press the matter by any means. In the end, for me, life had returned to a peaceful rhythm. My afternoons were once again filled with the simple joys of gardening, tinkering with my projects, and enjoying the company of friends and neighbors. I, 33 female, I'm going to preface this by saying that my 6-year-old daughter's father, 37 male, whom I'll call Jeff, has never been my romantic partner. We had a one-night stand. I don't like people calling him my ex, as it implies we had some kind of emotional attachment. He was never involved after I told him that I was pregnant, and he actually wanted me to terminate the pregnancy. However, I decided to raise my child alone since I have enough money to do so without child support. For the whole pregnancy and the first 4 years, Jeff was not in the picture. On my mother's recommendation, I did send him pictures and invited him to special events. But he always replied that he had no interest in my daughter. 2 years ago, he reappeared, demanding parental rights. When I didn't comply, he sued. I was denied parental rights. He was given the option to pay child support and then we could revisit giving him actual rights. But he refused. He has the money, much more than me, but he refuses. I still offered to let him see my daughter casually, no child support needed. It was the agreement that anything legal, medical, or educational would not involve him. He overstepped the boundaries and we had a fallout. After that, we didn't hear from him for almost 6 weeks before he called to meet for Christmas. After much discussion, I agreed to bring my daughter over on the condition that her godparents would come. Thus, we went over for Christmas dinner, but only to find out Jeff is married and had never told his family he had a child. It was uncomfortable being judged by a bunch of strangers. It was uncomfortable the whole time. I am going to use fake names, but let's just say my daughter's name is Katie. His wife kept calling my daughter Gabrielle. Not the actual name she used, but it was that different from my daughter's name. The wife was also very physical, trying to pick up my daughter or parent her. I will block her or tell her to please let me deal with my child. The whole time she pretty much ignored me, but Katie didn't seem nervous. So I decided to just bide my time. I hit my limit when my daughter said she needed the bathroom and this stranger went, "Oh Gabby, do you need the potty? Let mommy change you." My daughter hasn't worn diapers in a while now and is more than capable of going to the bathroom alone. I immediately told her to stay away from my daughter and that we were leaving. The woman started wailing that I was kidnapping her baby girl and tried to lunge at me. Her in-laws intervened, consoling her and saying that we weren't leaving and for her to calm down as if she was a victim. At that point, I just glared at Jeff and told him he had better explain or I would be calling the police. He asked me to speak in private in another room and suggested I could just leave my daughter with his parents. No way that would ever happen. Katie's godparents took her with them, despite the wife having a full meltdown. Jeff and I spoke outside and he explained that he and his wife had recently lost a daughter. I'm not going to give specific details on that, but all I'll say is that it was sudden and nobody's fault. And as I can only imagine, it had caused some psychological issues for his wife. Apparently, he had the brilliant idea that having Katie pass as their lost child would help his wife, without telling me. And that's why he wanted visitations and parental rights. He pleaded for me to leave my daughter with him for a little bit, and I asked him what his plan was when his wife heals. His response was disgusting. Well, I'll just send Katie back to you, and it will be just like before. I told him he was insane to think I would let him use my daughter like that, while his wife needs therapy with a professional, not feeding her delusions, and I would not let that woman come within miles of my daughter. He told me I was being cruel and didn't understand the pain of losing a child, and I agreed with him, but reminded Jeff that my priority is not his family, it's my child. What he and his family do to work through their grief has nothing to do with us. I also told him to call his lawyer because I am making sure he never has to contact my child again. So that's what I'm bracing for. He's been blasting my phone since Christmas, but I can easily ignore him. My daughter and I are doing a small travel vacation. This story is so funny, and I've heard it from my mom at least 20 times. It never gets old. For context, we are a Muslim family, quite conservative, from a very conservative village. We practice modesty very strictly, and there is a clear boundary between men and women. Flirting is heavily frowned upon. This took place in Saudi Arabia, which was also a super conservative country at the time. Now to the story. Mom and Dad had my sister, me, and my younger brother, who were 5, 3, and 2 years old respectively at the time, and my mom was also heavily pregnant and had a tumor in her left leg. We were all shopping at a mall. Due to her tumor and pregnancy, Mom was walking like a seal, her own description, as if she was tripping over herself. Meanwhile, in a mall full of women dressed in black from head to toe, even with their faces covered, one woman stood out. She came walking from the opposite side, slowly getting closer to us. Her abaya was unbuttoned and unzipped. She wore leggings underneath that defined her legs and stilettos that made loud clicking sounds with each step. Her hands were nicely decorated with bracelets that created their own melodies. She really stood out, not shaming anyone here. Suddenly, Dad started singing a song in Arabic that translates to, "She walks like a deer, the walk of a maiden." Considering my mom's condition, this was definitely not directed at her. Mom stopped and turned to him, exclaiming, "Excuse me?" And Dad immediately got defensive, saying, "It just slipped out." Mom retorted, "That means it was exactly what you were thinking." Dad, acting like the victim, tells Mom he's never taken her to the mall again. Mom, obviously mad, tells him he sounds ridiculous because he's the one flirting with another woman, while his kids and pregnant wife walked right beside him. She then vows to let the whole world know. A few days later, we traveled back to our home country, and as I said, we come from a village and word travels fast. Mom told everyone, again, I repeat, flirting is considered really rude and is heavily frowned upon in our society at the time. For the next 2 months, whoever saw my dad would start singing, "She walks like a deer, the walk of a maiden." Dad was embarrassed and humiliated as heck. We moved back to Saudi Arabia. My dad was friends with his co-workers and their wives were friends with my mom. Mom told him. 2 months ago, Ham proceeded to narrate the story. The wives went home and told their husbands. But next day when Dad went to work and the moment he opened the door, his co-worker sang, "She walks like a deer, the walk of a maiden." Dad immediately called my mom pleading, "Please, stop telling everyone." And Mom vowed again she would humiliate him over it. 17 years later, every time she meets someone new, this story is a must-tell. It might not sound like much, but in our society, this is actually pretty humiliating for my dad. Very funny for us though, never gets old. Edit. Dad laughs about this now. He's completely over it. He's the kind of person to wear his heart on his sleeve, so I can confidently say it doesn't affect him. Thanks though to everyone who's concerned and thought it's abusive or that my parents hate each other. They don't. They have a very healthy relationship. Let me tell you about the time I went to Vegas and how it turned into a tale of pity revenge that still cracks me up. My name's Mike, by the way. I'm your average Joe, but with a knack for finding myself in the oddest of situations. It all started when I decided to take a spontaneous trip to Vegas. I was feeling lucky, or so I thought. I landed, grabbed my bags and hailed a cab to take me to my hotel. The driver seemed grumpy right from the get-go. I tried making small talk, asking about the best casinos, but he just grunted responses. Halfway through, he suddenly pulls over. "Get out," he barks. Confused, I asked why. He said he didn't like my attitude and left me stranded. There I was in the middle of nowhere with my bags, watching the taillights of the cab disappear. So I walked. It took me hours to reach my hotel, and by then my mood had soured. Vegas wasn't kind to me. I lost more than I cared to admit. The games, the bright lights, the constant buzz, it was exhilarating but brutal. After several days of what I can only describe as a financial bloodbath, I decided it was time to head home. I was walking with my tail between my legs, pockets lighter than when I arrived. I packed my bags feeling defeated and made my way to the line of the cabs outside the hotel. And would you believe it? There he was, Mr. Grumpy, the cab driver who dumped me on a road at the very end of the line. As I stood there, an idea sparked in my mind. A petty, childish idea, but in that moment, it felt right. I am going to ride with this guy again. I'll let him know it. I went to the first cab in line. "How much to the airport?" I asked. The driver, a middle-aged man, with a bored expression said, $15. Then I asked the inappropriate question, the one about the you-know-what. His reaction was immediate. "Get the hell out of my cab," he shouted. I smirked and moved to the next cab, repeating the process. The reactions were priceless. Stupid, I know. Each driver kicked me out, but I kept going, all the way down the line. The other drivers began to notice, whispering and watching curiously. Finally, I reached the last cab. There he was, Mr. Grumpy, looking as surly as ever. "Hey, how much to the airport?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. He looked up, recognition flashing in his eyes, then quickly masked by indifference. $15. He grunted. I handed him the $15 and got in, saying, "Great, let's go." We pulled away, and as we did, I looked back at the line of cabs. The drivers were all staring, mouths agape. I gave them a big cheesy thumbs up, grinning from ear to ear. As we drove, I couldn't help but laugh to myself. Sure, it was petty, childish even, but at the moment it felt like a victory. Mr. Grumpy didn't say a word during the entire drive. We reached the airport and I thanked him with the biggest grin I could muster. He just nodded, clearly eager to see the back of me. I grabbed my bags and headed into the airport, still chuckling. You see, sometimes it's the little victories that count. I may have lost a fortune in Vegas, but I want a silly story to tell. And that, my friends, is a story of how I got my petty revenge on a grumpy cab driver in Vegas. I have 3 nieces and a nephew I was quite close to. They frequently spent weekends and every special occasion was us in our home. As of writing this, I've not seen them for nearly a year. My sister-in-law and I were both employed as caregivers to elderly homebound individuals. Because of our job experience, we were taking turns assisting our grandfather-in-law with dementia. In March, he received a credit card statement with over $21,000 in transactions. When confronted with a bill, sister-in-law admitted she had taken and used the credit card. On my next visit to assist him, I drove him to the sheriff's office to file criminal charges despite sister-in-law's promises to pay off the debt with the bank. Those charges are still pending. Sister-in-law was fired and blacklisted from working with elderly people and has cried that this should be punishment enough. Once charges were filed, the children were no longer allowed to spend any time with me, my husband, or our sons. She's run through several jobs and was recently fired from another one for, you guessed it, stealing. Just before Halloween, I switched jobs and noticed my social security card was missing. I then received a new credit card in the mail that I had not applied for. Sister-in-law currently resides at my previous address as we gave her the house where she currently lives. I often receive credit card offers in the mail and they have been sent to that address on numerous occasions. I was immediately suspicious, but with nothing to go on, I let it go. On November 21, I received a credit alert that I had opened a PayPal credit account and paid another PayPal user $250. I contacted the creditor as well as local law enforcement. Sister-in-law is adamant she's had nothing to do with this. I'm still waiting on paperwork from the bank to verify her contact information on the application. She dug in her heels and announced that the children are not allowed to spend any time with us for Christmas unless all charges against her are dropped. So this will be the first Christmas my youngest son hasn't spent with his cousins. He's heartbroken and I'm just pissed. I don't understand how she musters the audacity. Editing to answer some questions because this blew up. She's my husband's brother's wife. She turned 30 this year. Her kids are 11, 7, 4 and 2. My boys are 18 and 10. I froze my credits after I received the first credit card. Not 100% sure how the transaction still went through. My thought is that she had all the necessary information and could easily have unfrozen it. It's taken so long to nail down charges because attorneys are nitpicking over which charges she spent versus which were legitimate. Aside from bills, some purchases she made were $800 tickets to a Backstreet Boys concert, a $700 Venmo to her BFF, a $1,600 boudoir photo shoot, $600 at Victoria's Secret, $450 in deliveries from her favorite local Mexican restaurant, $400 ATV excursion in Cozumel, Mexico on a cruise her husband paid for, and $650 from a website that sells designer scrubs. Nothing was purchased for her kids. Update: at a court hearing this past week, sister-in-law was sentenced to serve 20 days in jail, suspended until after the first of the year, and must pay $8,000 in restitution. My father is a Canadian Satan. Growing up with him was less than fun, and I can assure you, based on witnessing it, he was a less than fun husband. I go on about what a piece of crap my father is, but instead I'll quote a judge. "You're the most despicable human I've ever had in my courtroom." And that's coming from a family court judge. I read this winning endorsement of my dad's personality in the court documents I acquired related to his divorce with my mom. The same place I discovered the mess he had engaged in to steal from my mom. It's also where I found the information I needed to get one over on him so severely he's going to disinherit me. A frame of reference about my father is that he is a pathological narcissist and behaves exactly how those people are compelled to act. They aren't generous to people, and punching them in the wallet is like a slap shot to the taint from Gretzky. He's kind of like Donkey from Shrek, but also Joseph Stalin, a monstrous jerk. About 10 months ago when our tale began, I was going through some stuff. Stuff being a whole lot of PTSD related to both my dad's abuse and my job as a paramedic. It did a ton that affected me deeply. Things that I needed to move past, along with all that other razzmatazz from 15 years of EMS. In trying to move past and work through everything, I quit drinking, started turning my untreated PTSD into treated PTSD, and thinking having my dad involved might help me and our relationship. Well, I seriously misjudged that one, so you'll probably be unsurprised to hear that the conversation went swimmingly. I'll spare you the lurid detail, but when I approached the subject with him, our back and forth degenerated into visceral hate, with him screaming at me that I'm a failed paramedic, liar, and a piece of crap alcoholic. While I have a certain pride about my job, I have more pride in my 14 months of sobriety. So hearing this from my old man might have caused me to behave a bit psychotically. I got right pissed off at him and decided to dig up every bit of dirt I could, see what kind of man he actually is and has been. When it was convenient, I hopped in the mystery machine before taking a trip to the courthouse to unleash my inner gumshoe. Everything is public record, so I bought copies before retiring to my easy chair to read. Plot and pit my white long-hair cat. For good measure, I obtained a file of divorce documents from my mother. Soon enough, I hit upon a line of inquiry worth following up on. It seems that during the final settlement of my parents' divorce 2002, my mother was awarded 1/3 of my father's employment pension. She was a stay-at-home mother and could not earn one herself, so it was given to her by a judge. Mighty strange because my father, as he brags, took a nearly full pension and retired a bit early. No way that jerk was living the last 10 years after retiring early on a 2/3 pension. He isn't constantly whining about it. So I asked my mother if she was collecting a pension from his job or had cashed out the value, 100K plus at the time, 20 years ago, and no to both questions. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if that's collectible and what 20 years of compound interest from a pension fund makes it worse. Well, I did eventually find out, along with the fact that my dear old dads have been collecting my mother's portion for 10 years, in hilariously open violation of a legal order from a judge. Why didn't my mother pursue this sooner? A combination of being unable to afford a lawyer, being his victim for 20 years, and pessimism after so much of his continued dodging obligation to the order. She just quit. There is effectively no statute of limitations he could hide behind because of the wording of the settlement. Insofar as I could tell, I had him dead to rights, and my mother would be collecting. It would be a slam dunk. I just needed to hire a lawyer to help me, so I set out to find the most unbalanced, bloodthirsty psychotic who passed the bar exam. The misanthropic sociopath I hired for legal counsel suggested we send a demand letter to the pension office to try and remedy it before filing what would undoubtedly be an easy win for him. I agreed in spirit and instead phoned up the pension office and got put through the woman managing my father's file. Well, she was a delight, and it was a trivial matter for me to get her to loathe my dad. We talked for 45 minutes, and I swear if you've given me another hour, I could have convinced her to suicide bomb his house. In all our conversations about life, families, and relationships, we got down to some things of note. Since I could show her correspondence her office had sent to my father, CC'd my mom on, some years ago and ongoing for 5 consecutive years, trying to resolve this matter which he had ignored, she was more than willing to start the process of remedy immediately. Full cooperation from this lady and her office was a matter of merely providing documentation. With my lawyer on retainer, this office was beyond asking my father to comply. They complied for him. About 2 months since I last spoke to my father, and he now had no idea his pension was about to take a serious hit. Below, I am going to break down how big a turd I put into his bowl of ice cream. My mother's portion was made whole and adjusted to reflect that her portion was brought to maturity and beyond, so his early retirement doesn't affect her fund. So he loses 10 years of valuation to her. He also retires 3 years early, which knocks him down now to 17 years of pension valuation, not 27. If you've forgotten, my dad had been collecting my mom's money and was overpaid by 30K per year for the last 10 years. Like I said, mom was made whole. So the pension company is going to claw back that overpayment from the base valuation of his current pension fund. I am not exactly sure what that does to the number, but it effectively nerfs my old man's private retirement fund. He's got a government old age pension that he took early too. Whoops. My dad did some awful crap to me, but I only had to suffer 17 years of him. My mom still has a high score at 20. As much as I did this for spite and malicious glee, I did do it to give my mom a chance at a proper retirement. My mother started collecting her pension about 3 months after I contacted the pension office, and to celebrate she bought tickets to New Zealand for the family for holidays, so we can see our relatives. I was able to get most of my retainer from the lawyer back, and to celebrate I went online to order a glitter bomb. I was able to ship it to my old man anonymously from another country. I heard through my sister he opened it up in his stupid red Miata. Ha ha ha. He'll never get rid of it. I read another story on here which inspired me to write this, but mine is nowhere near as interesting, unfortunately. During my first year of university, I shared a house with one other girl and 3 boys. The other girl kept to herself mainly. I was the only one who had a job and therefore that really bought anything with me other than clothes and a laptop. I decided to be nice and put my TV, quite a decent sized one, I had saved up for a while in that front room so everybody could watch it, as I could always just use my laptop when I was in my bedroom. One of the boys brought a PlayStation with him and connected it to the TV, which I had absolutely no problem with. For the first couple of months, everything was fine and they shared using the TV really well. I would generally watch an hour or two the days I wasn't working, and they used it most of the other time. After a while, every time I wanted to watch a program, I used to get, "There are 3 of us and 1 of you. Just go and watch it in your bedroom so we can play FIFA." For a lot of programs, I have no problem watching on my laptop, but there are certain things that are really better to watch on a real TV, and I did point out politely that the television did belong to me and I was only wanting it for an hour. I would also give them plenty of notice when I wanted to watch a program. Eventually, I just had enough and snapped. I came down to watch something after I told them the previous day I wanted to watch it, and they told me to go and watch it in my bedroom. So I did exactly that. I unplugged the TV from and disconnected their PlayStation and carried it up to my bedroom. I set it up just in time to watch my program, which I had to turn up extra loud to drown out their moaning and banging on my door. The only annoying thing is the next day one of them had called the bank of mommy and daddy, who apparently agreed with them that I was awful and had ordered a new TV for them, so they only really went with that for a week or so until it arrived. It was a bit smaller too. I, male 39, am on a Christmas holiday with wife's female 36 family. I have a dairy allergy, which means I can't eat butter, milk, yogurt, or cheese. Everyone in the family knows this, especially my mother-in-law, who is in charge of cooking. First 2 nights for dinner we had raclette. If you don't know what that is, it's basically you chop up your own vegetables and fry them on a little stand, then you add cheese, which you then grill on the same stand. Raclette is literally just fried chopped vegetables and potatoes unless you have a cheese. And furthermore, it takes about an hour to grill enough to feel full. Okay though, I made it through that. Just had extra nuts and chocolate. So on day 3 we were to have a more substantial meal with mashed potato. Except mother-in-law forgot about me and put butter and milk in. And instead of telling me and saying sorry, assigned this guy, wife's sister's partner, who is known as extremely unreliable, depressed, who also happened to be very ill and not someone you'd want making your food at all, to make a dairy-free mash. He boiled some potatoes and blended them, making a watery potato-only soup consistency broth, and this was served on a table in a saucepan with the rest of the meal that I could have. I asked for a bowl and poured out a portion of the potatoes and then offered it round to others. No one wanted any, including the guy who made it, and this was a point in which I just had enough, and I got seriously angry. Well, inside. So I made an excuse about having promised to call my mom and picked up the remaining meal and bowl of watery potatoes. I left to another room where I called my mom and I poured it down the toilet and just ate bread until I was full. Wife came in absolutely fuming, telling me I'd hurt the guy's feelings and that it was so rude to leave the dinner table. I laid my cards on the table. Why have I not been thought of for every single meal? I'm never asked what I want, and it's not hard to make things dairy-free or to buy some extra stuff and so on. Wife says I should just suck it up and that the guy made an effort, and I replied that he is not a kid. If I made something that's atrocious, I would not expect anyone to eat it like he was a child whose feelings I shouldn't hurt. I'm now in the doghouse. Apparently no one bought my need to call my mom story. Am I the jerk here? Edit, I forgot to mention that they all barely speak English, as we are in France. My wife is half French. This goes some of the way perhaps to me not being involved in meal discussions. It's not really possible for me to cook my own food in this situation. It's hard to explain, but mother-in-law and that side of the family are the cooks. We don't really get input. We offered to help and are always turned down. Mother-in-law has known me for 5 years, and she knows about my intolerance. She's just forgetting me, which is okay, it happens. And I basically got mad because they served me something basically inedible. And then they acted like nothing was wrong, rather than just saying sorry and getting me bread. A lot of people want to know what else was there. We had a portion of fried meat and there was a saucepan of cabbage, no bread, So without the potatoes, the meal was just meat and cabbage. Also, it's a cow's milk intolerance, meaning lactate doesn't work. Lots of people are still saying I should fix my own meals or go to the shops and get my own supplies. This is not really a polite thing in this situation, otherwise, I would 100% do that. You have to trust me on this one that it was not an option and that more offense would be caused if I offered to do that. And now some comments on a post. Someone saying, "You're not a jerk. I'm a fiend for gluten and dairy, but I was making a holiday feast this year with a friend who can't eat either. Really, it wasn't that hard to skip making gluten things and not use any butter. I just made smashed potatoes instead of mashed. Get some small potatoes, boil until soft, smash on a baking sheet with olive oil and bake until crispy. Because they sounded tasty and were something that worked for everyone. I think part of being a good host is making sure everyone is really included in the meal." Another commenter adds, "Everyone's a jerk. The French bit is key to your story. Cooking without dairy is pretty unheard of in traditional French cooking. I am wondering why you didn't make your own smashed potato puree, instead of letting someone else make you some weird soup. Bonding over food, not just eating but talking of the next meals. Food prep and meal tidy up is a key component of French culture. So, although it's not okay to buy your own separate meals to cook and eat when you're being hosted, you'll be the golden son-in-law to accompany during grocery shopping and point out alternatives, or sneak into the kitchen to help prep and brainstorm ideas, or ensure a portion is kept before adding the cream and so on. P.S. My point of view comes from being dairy intolerant and French. It's been 2 years, my mom still asks at every meal if I want cheese during the cheese course. I help with meal prep when I'm passing remind her that the Navarin will be delicious, but with what cream? And she'll remember. And I'll say, "Oh, no worries, you haven't added it yet. We can put a small portion aside, then I'll have it cream-free." "Oh, you have coconut cream?" "Yes, that could work." Dairy is super hard for French home cooks over 30. Like really hard to remember to avoid. It's in everything we eat.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.